John had always trusted Lisa. They had been together for over a decade, building their lives in harmony. Lisa was an energetic woman, constantly striving to improve herself, and a fitness enthusiast. For the last 2 years, her evenings at the fitness club had become routine. John admired her dedication, thinking it was part of her desire to stay healthy and active. He never questioned it until now. It started as a nagging feeling, a slight discomfort at the pit of his stomach. One evening, Lisa came home later than usual, her face flushed, but not from exertion. She was different, distant, distracted. John brushed it off, assuming she had a rough day, or maybe just pushed herself too hard at the gym. But this wasn't a one-time occurrence. Over the next few weeks, Lisa's behavior became increasingly peculiar. She was more glued to her phone, constantly messaging someone. But every time John entered the room, she'd lock her screen with a quick, almost guilty flick of her wrist. When he asked, she'd smile and say it was nothing important. Just the girls from the gym, she'd insist. But her explanation started feeling hollow. John had never been the type to pry, yet the growing silence between them gnawed at him. She no longer asked about his day with genuine interest, and when he asked about hers, she'd gloss over the details, always claiming the fitness club was keeping her busy. It was all too vague, too empty. One Friday, John decided to take an unexpected day off. He figured it would be a surprise. Maybe they could spend some time together, rekindle the energy they used to share. Lisa had told him she'd be heading to the fitness club as usual that evening, so he thought he'd drop by and surprise her afterward. She'd been spending hours there. Yet whenever John asked about going together, she waved off the idea, claiming she needed that time for herself. At 6 p.m., John arrived at the fitness club. The parking lot was busier than he expected, full of cars of all shapes and sizes. He casually strolled inside, noticing a few familiar faces of gym-goers who knew Lisa. As he approached the front desk, the familiar sight of the gym manager, Diane, caught his eye. Diane was always cheerful, and she greeted him with her usual bright smile. "Hey, John, what brings you here? Decided to join the fitness craze, too?" she teased lightly. John grinned back, feeling slightly sheepish. "Not quite. I'm actually here to see if Lisa's finished her workout yet. Thought I'd surprise her." Diane's smile faltered for a second, replaced by a puzzled look. "Lisa?" "Yeah," John replied, the unease stirring again. "She's been coming here regularly, right? Just wanted to catch her before she leaves." Diane's confusion deepened. "John, I haven't seen Lisa in almost a month. She used to come by every day, but she stopped suddenly. I thought maybe she found another place or just took a break." John felt his stomach drop. The words hit him like a slow, dull thud, reverberating in his mind. She hadn't been coming here for a month. That didn't make sense. Every evening, Lisa left the house claiming to go to the fitness club. She'd return hours later, always tired, always with some excuse as to why she didn't want to chat much after her workout. But according to Diane, she hadn't been anywhere near the club. Trying to maintain composure, John forced a tight smile. "Oh, yeah, she must have changed her schedule or something. Thanks, Diane." Walking back to his car, the world around John felt muted, his mind reeling. His heart thudded heavily in his chest. A mixture of confusion and the first seeds of suspicion planting themselves deep. What could this mean? If she hadn't been going to the fitness club, then where had she been? And why hadn't she told him? John drove home slowly, his thoughts spiraling. A part of him wanted to confront Lisa immediately, to ask her what was really going on. But another part, the deeper, more rational side, urged him to wait. He needed more than just a gut feeling before confronting her. He needed something solid, something undeniable. If Lisa had been hiding something from him, he would find out, but not yet. That evening, Lisa came home at her usual time. John watched her closely as she entered, her smile bright but fleeting, like she was wearing a mask. She kissed him on the cheek, her eyes briefly meeting his before darting away, as though she couldn't hold his gaze for long. He asked how her workout was, and she responded with the usual vague answers. His heart pounded as he played along, pretending everything was normal. But inside, the doubt was growing like a cancer, eating away at the trust that had once been rock solid. Later that night, John lay in bed, wide awake, while Lisa slept beside him, her breathing calm and steady. He stared at the ceiling, his mind racing through every interaction, every moment they'd shared in the past month. The smallest details began to stand out. Her newfound secrecy, the way she would leave her phone face down on the table, her sudden disinterest in spending time together. The more he thought about it, the more his unease grew. What was she hiding from him? Who was she really spending her time with? John knew one thing for sure. Something was terribly wrong, and he wasn't going to rest until he found out the truth. John's suspicions had been building steadily since the strange conversation with Diane at the fitness club. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Lisa's distant behavior, her secrecy, and the strange, new routines were all red flags. But he still lacked concrete evidence, and confronting her without proof could backfire, leaving him looking like a paranoid fool. He needed something undeniable. One evening, John's chance arrived unexpectedly. Lisa had gone to meet up with some friends after her gym session, or so she said, but she had taken an Uber, claiming her car had been making strange noises earlier in the day. John barely reacted when she mentioned it. His mind was already spinning with the possibilities. Lisa's car was sitting in the driveway, unattended. After she left, John found himself standing in the garage, staring at the car. The keys were on the kitchen counter, where Lisa had casually tossed them before leaving. He hesitated for a moment, battling with himself about whether to invade her privacy like this. But then the doubts, the lies, and the unease in his gut flared up again. He couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. With trembling hands, he grabbed the keys and unlocked the car. The familiar smell of Lisa's perfume hit him as he opened the door, but it did nothing to soothe his nerves. He slid into the driver's seat, his heart pounding, and began his search. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The usual gym gear was in the back seat, a towel, water bottle, and her gym bag. He rummaged through the bag, but it was just filled with workout clothes and nothing out of the ordinary. But as he reached down under the passenger seat, his fingers brushed against something plastic. He pulled out a crumpled wrapper. His heart raced as he unfolded it, the reality of what he was holding dawning on him. It was a condom wrapper. His hand trembled as he dropped it onto the seat. He immediately reached back under the seat, searching for more. After a few moments of frantic searching, he found 2 more, used condoms this time, hidden in small plastic bags. The sight of them made his stomach churn. This was it. His worst fears had come true. The lies, the secrecy, the distant behavior, it all made sense now. Lisa had been cheating on him. The condoms were undeniable proof, more real than anything he could have imagined. His mind raced with emotions, anger, hurt, betrayal. He felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. John sat in the car for a long time, clutching the plastic bags in his hands, staring blankly at the dashboard. The woman he had loved, trusted, and built a life with had been hiding this from him. Every night she claimed to be at the gym. She was with someone else. The rage boiled up inside him, overwhelming his ability to think clearly. He wanted to storm out, call her, confront her right then and there. But something stopped him. He knew that acting on pure emotion right now wouldn't give him the satisfaction or closure he needed. No, he had to be smart about this. He had to plan his next move. But the anger continued to build as the minutes passed. How could she do this? How long had this been going on? John's mind was a whirl of questions, each one driving a fresh wave of hurt and fury. Eventually, he forced himself to put the condoms back where he found them, hiding any sign of his discovery. He couldn't let her know that he had been searching the car. Not yet. His time would come. As he locked the car and headed back inside the house, John's thoughts turned dark. Revenge. That was the only thing that made sense now. She had destroyed their marriage, their trust, everything they had built together, and she wasn't going to get away with it. But John wasn't going to act impulsively. He needed time to think, to plan his revenge, so that it would hurt her as much as she had hurt him. But just as John's thoughts began to spiral deeper into his desire for vengeance, he felt an odd sensation creeping over him. His head was beginning to throb, and his body felt weak. It started slowly at first, but within minutes, he was hit by a wave of exhaustion, so intense it was as if his body was shutting down. His legs wobbled as he stumbled into the living room, collapsing onto the couch. The fever hit him like a freight train, draining all the energy from his limbs. He could barely keep his eyes open, the room spinning around him. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just as he was ready to act, his body had decided to betray him. He would have to wait. His plans for revenge would be postponed until he recovered. As John lay there, shivering under the weight of the fever, he realized he couldn't stop now. The condoms were proof that Lisa was cheating on him. But what if there was more? He needed to know everything before he could make his next move. He couldn't act in haste. He had to be sure, and when the time came, his revenge would be brutal and swift. Lisa returned later that night, moving quietly through the house, oblivious to the storm raging inside John. She didn't even check on him as she went to bed, leaving John alone with his fever and his swirling thoughts of betrayal and revenge. As he drifted into a restless sleep, John vowed that when the time came, he would make Lisa regret every single moment of her betrayal. John's fever ebbed and flowed over the next few days, forcing him into a restless haze. His body fought against the illness, but his mind never let go of the discovery that had shattered his world. As he lay bedridden, each quiet moment alone only fueled the fire inside him. The used condoms, the lies, Lisa's deceit, it all played over and over again in his head. His rage was a constant, burning under the surface, but he knew he had to bide his time. When Lisa came home each evening, she acted like nothing was wrong, caring for him with mechanical tenderness, bringing him soup, checking his temperature, all while likely still sneaking off to be with whoever she was seeing behind his back. The realization sickened him, but John kept up the act, pretending nothing had changed. He needed her to think he was none the wiser, at least for now. As the fever began to subside, John's thoughts became sharper. He spent hours lying in bed planning. Confronting her outright was not enough. He wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal. He wanted her to hurt, to lose everything she had taken for granted in their marriage. But how? What could he do that would be so precise, so painful, that she would never forget the consequences of what she'd done? He considered the obvious, divorce, but that seemed too simple, too clean. No! Lisa deserved worse. John knew he needed to take something from her, just like she had taken everything from him. Their trust, their bond, the life they had built together. The first step would be gathering more evidence. He couldn't risk her trying to worm her way out of it, pleading ignorance or twisting the truth. He needed to know who she was seeing, where they were meeting, and how long this had been going on. The condoms had given him proof of the affair, but not the full picture. He needed every detail. A plan started forming in John's mind. He'd always been good with technology, and while he had never considered spying on his wife before, the gloves were off now. He had every right to know what she was doing behind his back. He decided he'd track her movements, install a GPS tracker in her car, monitor her phone, and maybe even set up a hidden camera. Whatever it took to catch her in the act, to confirm everything. The next evening, Lisa left again, her gym routine as consistent as ever. This time, she even gave John a sweet kiss on the forehead, as if she were genuinely concerned for his recovery. The gesture made his stomach turn, but he smiled weakly and watched her leave. As soon as she was out of the house, John sprang into action. He grabbed her laptop and phone, both of which she carelessly left behind. Unlocking them was easy. He had memorized her passwords long ago. He quickly installed tracking software on both devices, programs that would give him access to her texts, call logs, and even her location in real time. Then, he moved her car. This part was trickier, but John had done his research. He installed a small GPS tracker under the dashboard, hidden from view. It would be undetectable to Lisa, and it would send him alerts on her whereabouts at all times. John worked quickly and efficiently, driven by the burning desire to know everything. By the time Lisa returned later that night, the house was quiet. John was back in bed, feigning sleep, but his mind was alive with anticipation. The first phase of his plan was complete. Over the next few days, as John slowly recovered from his illness, he began to gather more and more information. Each time Lisa left the house, he tracked her movements. It didn't take long to confirm his suspicions. She wasn't going to the gym. She wasn't even staying in the neighborhood. The GPS tracker revealed she was meeting someone in the city, at a hotel, no less. The phone logs told him even more. There were hundreds of texts between her and an unknown number, messages filled with affection, flirtation, and plans to meet. It was all there in black and white, the evidence of her betrayal. John's heart broke as he read through the messages, but his resolve only hardened. She had been lying to him for months. The affair was deeper than he had imagined. The more he learned, the more his anger grew. Lisa was leading a double life, and all the while, she had been playing the part of the dutiful wife. But now John had everything he needed. The puzzle was complete, and it was worse than he had ever expected. The affair wasn't some fleeting fling. It was serious. The man she was seeing was a coworker, someone she had apparently grown close to over the past year. The hotel meetings, the long texts, the fake gym excuses. It all pointed to one undeniable conclusion. She was in love with this man, and John had been nothing but a blind fool in her eyes. He could feel his blood boiling with each passing day. The knowledge ate away at him, but now he had clarity. The time for planning was over. It was time to act. He began imagining ways to destroy her life as she had destroyed his. Revenge wasn't just a fleeting thought anymore. It was a mission. He considered contacting her coworker's wife, if he had won, and exposing the affair. He thought about spreading the details to their mutual friends, humiliating Lisa in the process. Maybe he could even leak the information at her workplace, ruining her professional reputation. But none of those ideas felt quite right. Too impersonal, too indirect. No, he needed something more visceral, something that would cut her as deeply as her betrayal had cut him. As he sat one evening, still pretending to be recovering from his illness, a new idea took root. He would confront her, not with accusations, but with facts. He would lay out every detail of her affair, and he would do it in a way that made her squirm, made her feel the full weight of his anger and disappointment. He would make her beg for forgiveness, and when she did, he would destroy whatever hope she had left. He would leave nothing to chance. That evening, while Lisa was once again away, John started putting his plan into motion. He prepared a collection of everything he had discovered. The text messages, the hotel receipts, the GPS logs, everything. When the moment came, he would show her all of it, and there would be no way she could deny the truth. Then, when she was at her most vulnerable, he would deliver the final blow. As he drifted off to sleep that night, his mind was filled with thoughts of the confrontation that would soon come. It would be brutal. It would be satisfying, and Lisa would never see it coming. John was ready. The confrontation was set for tonight. He had gathered everything. The texts, the GPS logs, the proof of Lisa's betrayal. All of it was laid out on the table, waiting for her. She would have no way to escape the truth. His anger, which had been festering for weeks, was now sharpened into a cold, calculated plan. He heard Lisa's car pull into the driveway. This was it. His heart pounded in anticipation. But then, as the door opened and Lisa walked in, everything took a turn John never expected. She wasn't alone. His heart lurched as he saw her accompanied by her best friend, Claire. They were laughing as they walked in, their arms full of groceries. John froze, his plans suddenly derailed. Claire wasn't supposed to be here. "Hey, babe," Lisa called cheerfully, completely unaware of the evidence waiting for her in the other room. "I picked up a few things for dinner, and Claire's staying over for a bit to catch up. Hope that's okay." John felt his breath catch. This wasn't part of the plan. He had been preparing for a private confrontation, the perfect moment to expose her lies. Now, Claire's presence was an obstacle. He couldn't have the confrontation in front of her. He needed Lisa alone. His mind raced. Claire's arrival had thrown off his carefully laid plans, and now he had to think quickly. If he tried to send Claire away, it would be suspicious. Lisa might catch on that something was wrong before he had the chance to confront her with the evidence. He forced a smile, keeping his emotions in check. Yeah, sure. That's fine. As the two women disappeared into the kitchen, John's pulse quickened. He needed a new plan. Claire was a complication, but not an insurmountable one. He just had to bide his time until she left. But the weight gnawed at him. He had been so close to finally exposing Lisa's lies. Now, all he could do was sit in the living room, pretending everything was normal, while the rage inside him grew stronger with every passing minute. The hours ticked by, painfully slow. Claire stayed longer than expected, chatting with Lisa as they cooked and ate together, oblivious to the storm brewing inside John. He kept glancing at the clock, willing her to leave, but she stayed well into the evening. Every moment felt like an eternity. John's mind raced with anger and frustration. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and now he had to endure the unbearable weight. All while Lisa laughed and joked, completely unaware that her world was about to fall apart. Finally, after what felt like an endless evening, Claire stood up to leave. Lisa walked her to the door, the two women exchanging hugs and promises to catch up again soon. John barely contained his relief as the door finally closed, leaving him alone with Lisa. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. Lisa turned to him with a tired but content smile. Sorry that went on so long. What did you want to do tonight? Maybe we can watch something together. John stared at her, his heart pounding. The rage he had held in check all evening now surged to the surface, but he forced himself to stay calm. This was the moment of truth, and he wouldn't let the weight go to waste. Without a word, he gestured toward the kitchen table, where the laptop sat open, displaying the incriminating evidence. Lisa's smile faltered as she saw it, her eyes flicking between the screen and John's cold, unblinking stare. What's this?" she asked, her voice suddenly unsure. John stood up, his face set in a hard, emotionless mask. "You tell me." As Claire left, John's anticipation returned in full force. His plan had been delayed, but now the moment had arrived. The long hours of waiting had only deepened the burning rage in his chest. He had spent weeks preparing for this confrontation, meticulously gathering evidence. Now, it was time to exact the revenge he had so carefully planned. Lisa approached him, her usual cheerfulness drained from her face as she saw the cold expression on John's. She noticed the laptop on the table, the papers scattered across it. Her eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across her face. She didn't yet understand the magnitude of what she was about to face. "What's all this?" she asked cautiously, her voice already tinged with unease. John didn't answer. Instead, he simply gestured to the laptop, where the damning evidence was displayed. The messages, the GPS logs, the hotel receipts, it was all there, staring her in the face. John remained silent, watching her reaction, his heart pounding in anticipation of the moment she would realize just how much he knew. Lisa's eyes widened as she saw the messages, her face draining of color. "John, what is this?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "You tell me," John said, his voice cold, his eyes never leaving her. Lisa stared at the screen in horror, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She took a step back from the table, as if the evidence was something physically threatening her. Her mind raced, clearly searching for an excuse, but there was no room for lies anymore. I can explain," she started, her voice trembling. "Explain!" John cut her off, his voice rising. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking off to hotels, cheating behind my back, and you think you can explain this?" Tears welled in Lisa's eyes. "John, please, I never meant for it to go this far. I love you, Love me?" John's voice dripped with contempt. Is that what you call this? Sneaking around, sleeping with another man, lying to me every day? Is that love, Lisa? She broke down, her sobs choking her words. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, please, John. We can fix this. We can work through this. But John wasn't interested in working through anything. He had planned for this moment, and there was no room for forgiveness. He had something far more devastating in mind. John walked to the kitchen counter and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were copies of everything he had found, the text messages, the hotel records, even photographs of her with the other man. But this folder wasn't just for Lisa. No! This was for her family, her friends, and her workplace. He tossed the folder onto the table in front of her. You see that? That's every detail of your affair, laid out in black and white. And tomorrow, everyone's going to know. Your parents, your friends, your boss, everyone. Lisa's sobs grew louder as she clutched the folder, her hands trembling. No, John, please, she begged, falling to her knees in front of him. Don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off contact with him. I swear, just please, don't ruin me like this. John looked down at her, cold and unfeeling. He had imagined this moment, and her desperate begging only fueled the satisfaction of seeing her brought to her knees. You destroyed our marriage, Lisa. Now I'm going to destroy your life, John said, his voice filled with the finality of a man who had already made up his mind. Lisa crawled toward him, grabbing his legs, her voice hysterical. Please, John, you don't have to do this. I'm begging you. John pushed her off, stepping back as her hands fell limp. I gave you everything, and you threw it all away. Now you're going to know what it feels like to lose everything. He turned, grabbing his jacket from the back of the chair. Tomorrow morning, those files are being sent to everyone you know. Your family will know you're a liar. Your friends will know you're a cheater. And your boss? Well, let's just say I don't think they'll keep you around once they find out what kind of person you really are. Lisa collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. But John didn't look back. He walked out the door, leaving her behind in a heap of despair. The sound of her cries echoed through the house, but they didn't touch him. Not anymore. As John stepped into the cold night air, a strange calm washed over him. He had done it. His revenge wasn't violent or explosive. It was precise, calculated, and devastating. He had ripped apart Lisa's world, just as she had done to his. And when tomorrow came, her life would be in ruins. He walked to his car and drove away, the lights of the house fading into the distance. The weight of the betrayal still hung heavy in his heart, but it was tempered by the knowledge that he had taken control. He had made her pay for what she had done, and now he was free. John drove through the darkened streets, the headlights of his car casting long shadows as he moved away from the house that had once been his home. The calmness that had settled over him after his confrontation with Lisa now began to sink deeper into his bones. He had done it, taken his revenge, torn her world apart in the same way she had torn apart his heart and trust. But as he drove, John realized that something still felt hollow inside him. He had executed his plan perfectly, leaving Lisa sobbing in her own despair. The image of her, broken on the kitchen floor, begging him not to ruin her life, replayed in his mind. He had wanted to feel satisfaction from that moment, the sweet sense of justice. But what he felt now was emptiness. Revenge, it seemed, hadn't filled the void left by her betrayal. He pulled into a quiet parking lot, turning off the engine and sitting in silence for a moment. His phone buzzed on the seat next to him. It was an email notification from the service he had scheduled to send out the files. The final act of his revenge. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., everyone Lisa knew would receive the detailed evidence of her affair. There was no stopping it now. He had destroyed her life. And yet, here he was, alone in his car, still feeling the weight of the loss. The truth hit him slowly, like the settling of dust after a storm. The destruction of her life hadn't brought back the one thing he had truly lost, the trust, the love, the connection they had once shared. He had shattered her world, but his own world was still broken too. John leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes as he let out a long breath. The anger that had driven him for so long was beginning to dissipate, leaving behind only the raw pain of betrayal. The marriage was over. There was no going back. But now John realized the next part of his life was in his hands. He had spent weeks focused on revenge, but now, without that burning goal, he had to decide what came next. Would he let this betrayal define him? Or would he move forward, rebuild, and start a new chapter? He opened his eyes and looked at his phone. For a moment, he hovered over the scheduled email, his thumb resting on the screen. He could stop it if he wanted to. He had the power to pull the trigger on Lisa's public shaming, or to stop the bomb from going off. John's mind raced. Would sending that email really give him peace? Would it truly make him feel whole again? He had already taken his revenge by confronting her, by watching her break down in front of him. Maybe that was enough. But just as quickly as the thought surfaced, he dismissed it. No. Lisa needed to face the consequences of what she had done. She had broken him, broken their marriage, and she had to pay for it. He wouldn't be the one to save her from the fallout. She had chosen this path. John let go of the phone, letting the scheduled email stand. Tomorrow, the world would know what she had done. It wasn't his responsibility to protect her anymore. With a deep breath, John started the car again, feeling the quiet hum of the engine beneath him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he couldn't stay in the past. The house, the memories, the life he had shared with Lisa, they were all behind him now. It was time to let go. He drove through the night, heading toward the city. He had no destination in mind, only a sense of moving forward. The road stretched out in front of him, dark and empty, a blank slate. And for the first time in weeks, John felt the faint stirrings of something else inside him. A spark of hope. The betrayal, the anger, the revenge, it had consumed him for so long. But now, as the city lights began to flicker on the horizon, he realized he didn't have to carry that weight forever. The revenge was done, and now it was time to rebuild his life. Not with Lisa, not with anyone from his old world, but for himself. He smiled faintly at the thought. Maybe he didn't need to find a new wife or rush into another relationship. Maybe the best thing he could do was focus on himself, his own happiness, his own future. For once, he was free to decide what his life would be without anyone else shaping it. John drove on, the distant glow of the city getting closer. He didn't know where the road would take him, but he knew one thing for certain. He was leaving his old life behind, and that was the first step towards something better.